Fighting in Ethiopia escalates again. While Tigrayan forces accuse Eritrea of launching a full-on offensive, the United Nations says civilians should brace for more atrocities. In a moment, we'll hear from the Ethiopian military's former chief of staff and current ambassador to Ankara. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Ethiopia. Well, the end of a fragile truce has led to a dangerous increase in violence in Ethiopia's Tigray province. While the region is closed off to journalists, the U.S. envoy there says there is fighting in several areas between government troops and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. To complicate matters even more, the TPLF says Eritrea has sent its military over the border, a move the U.S. says only inflames an already tragic situation. In a report released earlier this week, the United Nations said war crimes have likely been committed and also indicated that some are ongoing. In a moment, we'll speak to Ethiopia's ambassador to Türkiye, who previously served as the military's chief of staff. But first, this report on the current state of the conflict.
The UN faced nearly insurmountable opposition while collecting facts about the fighting in Tigray. The Ethiopian government rejected investigators' access to areas outside of Addis Ababa. Sudan and Djibouti also blocked them from talking to Ethiopian refugees within their borders, and interviewing people in Tigray remotely was hampered by continuous telecommunications blackouts. And yet, investigators this week released their first report for the UN Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. Its conclusion? There are reasonable grounds to believe that parties to the conflict have committed war crimes and violations and abuses of human rights. Those crimes include the shelling of civilians and carrying out of extrajudicial killings. They also say Ethiopian troops raped and sexually abused civilians since the conflict began in November of 2020. The Commission also suggested that Addis Ababa uses starvation as a weapon by restricting humanitarian aid into the Tigray region. The tactic has left millions of people in dire straits. However, Ethiopia's government has rejected the accusations.
The report itself is self-contradictory and biased, which doesn't pay any attention to the atrocities committed in Afar and Amhara region, but solely focusing on Tigray. Therefore, we have no other option but to reject this report, as you have rejected the resolution that established it and the very establishment of this mechanism as well.
But the UN report also accuses the Tigray People's Liberation Front of committing similar atrocities. A survivor of the TPLF offensive in Amhara told the Commission, "Tigrayan fighters came to my house, dragged me outside, and beat me in the mud. My husband arrived, and they killed him. Their colonel and 3 guards raped me. The colonel raped me twice. When he was done, I crawled to my crying children. More soldiers came, beat me, and took my grain." On Tuesday, the TPLF said Eritrean forces have joined Ethiopian troops to launch a full-scale offensive in Tigray. If confirmed, it marks an escalation in the conflict since fighting restarted last month. Fighting, the UN says, is likely to cause further atrocities.
So with all sides accused of atrocities and violence expected to continue, even worsen, I'm joined now from Ankara by Adem Mohammed Mahmud. He is Ethiopia's ambassador to Türkiye and was also chief of staff of Ethiopia's armed forces. Thank you so much for being with us. Greatly appreciated. I will first ask you to establish where you stand, because you were dismissed as the armed forces chief of staff on October 8th, 2020. That was just a month before Ethiopian national forces began their offensive in Tigray. It was reported that you had doubts about the offensive. Did you?
No.
You had no doubts at all. So you are confident that your government is doing the right thing in Tigray at present?
You know, Andrea, thank you for having me. And as far as the case you raised, you know, the first provocation attack has been made by TPLF. You know, as you know, the Ethiopian Federal Defense Forces were stationed for about 20 years in Tigray. So the TPLF elite decided and to attack by the preemptive attack. So this totally was unacceptable, and government has had a legitimate measure to reverse this attack.
Okay, so you feel there is justification to intervene militarily, but could more have been done to work with Tigrayan representatives in the national government to at least avoid the massive escalation that ensued?
So as you know, TPLF was one of the dominant party in PRDF. So due to the reform agenda, which is demanding by Ethiopian people, as the TPLF, you know, became out of the power. And so the TPLF decided to reverse and disrupt this change. And then the federal government tried its best to accommodate through a number of discussions and negotiating with elder peoples to come to peace from the outset.
Okay. As it stands now, though, it is generally accepted as fact that Eritrean forces are fighting the TPLF and that they are cooperating directly with the government in Addis. Some even say that this was part of the government's own cynical plan all along to make peace with Eritrea to ensure its support in any future conflict with Tigray. Is there any truth to that?
Not at all. You know, the Ethiopian government, one of the reform agenda is to achieve a sustainable peace in the country. So the Ethiopian government has to deal with the Eritrean government to solve the no peace, no war condition for about 20 years. So I think as a good neighbor, the new government has to solve this problem peacefully. This is what our government is doing, and there is no anything other purpose of this peace dealing with the Eritrean government.
Okay, you know, part of the reason that we're talking right now is because it's been very difficult, if not impossible, for journalists really to get into the area, to document and better understand what's happening on the ground. And also because more government representatives like yourself aren't speaking to the press. Why not? Why has it been so hard to get around the communications blackout, to get journalists and investigators on the ground, and to get more voices from the government to tell us what is actually happening?
You know, Andrea, you should have to know that the government of Ethiopia is fully giving adequate information for media. As far as I know, since began the conflict in November 3, 2020. As far as I know, our government is very transparent and accountable for media organization, including for his people. I don't know. I don't have any evidence for this to justify blocking any journalist to go to this conflict area. But this time,
do you honestly have no knowledge of that?
Understand
because
that
it's been widely reported how many correspondents have not been allowed in.
No. You know, you have to know the circumstances of the situation on the ground. So Ethiopian government doesn't have any effective control at all in this conflict area, especially in Tigray. So the Ethiopian government, I think, doesn't give any information about the situations right now inside Tigray. So the Tigrayan fighters have to do this, and responsible for this to inform for the international communities.
Okay, it's what people don't understand is in order to get into Tigray, you basically have to go through Ethiopia, and that's where journalists are being blocked. They can't even get the passage through greater Ethiopia to get to Tigray to be able to report and find out what is actually going on. Let me ask you, though, moving forward, we need to talk about how, if at all, peace.
No, as far as I know, as far as I know, Andrea, sorry. As far as I know, there is no any demand from your station or from anywhere asking to go to Addis Ababa or to interview anybody to give you any information about this. And for future, I can guarantee you this, as there is no any obstacle or restriction for this.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that then and see if more journalists can get in to actually see what is happening. But in the meantime, we wanted to discuss as well with you how peace can be restored, if it can, because the sad truth, I will put this to you, is that many think the solution lies in the so-called Balkanization of Ethiopia, first by even allowing Tigray to secede. Is that at all being discussed as a possibility in the capital, or are Ethiopian national forces and the government ready to fight until the very end?
You know, the Ethiopian government is doing from the beginning, to get a solution for this conflict through a peaceful resolution. So due to this, the Ethiopian government has taken many measures, starting from withdrawal force from Tigray and releasing high-profile TPLF leaders and declaring a humanitarian truce, and also declaring a unilateral ceasefire. This all thing, what the government objective is, just to solve peacefully the conflict. There is no any military solution for this conflict. We know very much about this. That's why now the Ethiopian Defense Forces, TPLF is attacked for the third time in Amhara and Afar region. This is already officially announced on 23 August 23, 2022, and then the attack after one day already happened. So this
okay, but the Amhara groups,
TPLF already declared officially.
Yes, the Amhara groups also accuse.
Yeah, let me finish. The TPLF, who? Sorry.
I was going to say that the Amhara groups, there are several that also accuse the government of oppression, but as you say, they are also fighting the TPLF over land. Oromo groups are asking for self-determination, and they accuse the government of gross human rights violations as well. Let me ask you, what national sense of unity can the government actually rally when so many ethnic groups disagree with what the government is doing, and they do not want a centralized state?
Andrea, you have to understand that this current government is a very legitimate elected by Ethiopian people. So I don't think that your question is relating to the TPLF agenda. The TPLF agenda is just want to come to power, but that elite had been for about 13 years on power. So there could be any political resentment in some group and somewhere. So it doesn't mean this relating this with TPLF. This is really unacceptable and untrue.
Right, but that's the basis for the conflict specifically with the TPLF, is that the government believes they want to come back to power, they want to control the resources and more of the economy as they did once before. But I was also bringing up the fact that there are several other ethnic groups that disagree with the government. And it seems that the country, in some ways people argue, and that's why we've heard the term balkanization, with so many groups and ethnic groups looking for self-determination, I was asking how the government can go about really rallying support nationwide for the government in Addis Ababa, or is it going to have to keep fighting various groups across different parts of the country?
I again want to explain, my government is a legitimate elected government by the 80% of the population of Ethiopia. So there could be any group who dislikes this government or any concern or any agenda, but it's really it's not acceptable to say to relate this kind of things in our side. But still, my government is ready for inclusive dialogue for any Ethiopians, whatever organized at society level, whatever. If there is any consent, any consideration for the country who want to see, I think my government already ratified a law and elected organized committees to facilitate this national-based comprehensive inclusive dialogue.
Okay.
This is the main and basic platform that the government already committed and doing this one. Okay. Again, in addition to this, the Ethiopian government also ready to negotiate with the TPLF. This already many times stated and declared, but the TPLF, nothing reciprocated the government peace call.
Okay, Ambassador Adem, very unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.